So I've entitled my remarks, Assessment and Evaluation, Little Pixels and the Big Picture. There are three parts to it: assessment and evaluation and the teacher's role, assessment in a diverse and dynamic world, and the implications of high-stakes, large-scale performance tests. I think you'll see in my remarks that they line up with some of my fellow panelists and other speakers today, but they'll also bump up against that. I think I'll begin with this, that there's a public perception sometimes that we, in the federations, unions, and associations, take an oppositional stance just for the sake of being contrarian. And I'm not sure that that's a fair perception, but we do believe in evidence-based decision-making that's informed by the day-to-day lived experience of classroom teachers. I'm going to start with an invitational prompt here. I'm going to ask you to reflect on your own schooling and think of a positive, memorable assessment experience. What did it feel like? Why did it feel like that? I'm not asking you to share, just to think about it. So assessment, evaluation, and the teacher's role. I think it's helpful to make a distinction between the terms assessment and evaluation. It'll be helpful in my remarks. So assessment is really the ongoing process. It's the gathering of evidence and the interpretation of that evidence about students' learning. The purpose of determining where they are and then to provide support and feedback about where they need to go and how to get there. That's more like a coach. Evaluation is a process of judging. It's assigning some value to that, the quality of students' learning, and that's more like a judge. The overarching principle in the Growing Success, which is the Ministry's document, 2010 document, Guiding Assessment, Evaluation, and Reporting. And don't worry, I'm getting off Education Acts and policy documents. I'll get into other stuff. So the primary purpose of assessment and evaluation is to improve student learning. So the Education Act does set out the fact that teachers are key agents in the assessment and evaluation of students. It's a key duty of their role. And the Ministry of documents, assessment and evaluation policy documents, explicitly acknowledge teachers' professional exercising their professional judgment, that it's the cornerstone of assessment and evaluation in Ontario. So there's no question assessment and evaluation is critical in the classroom. It's the goal of developing students as independent learners, and so it's inextricably tied to the teaching and learning process or cycle. I'll say this, that for decades, educational researchers exploring promising or best practices, assessment practices, have regularly underscored the benefits of timely and descriptive feedback in contributing to improvements in learning and contributions to student success, and especially for those who are struggling. So in the classroom, teachers are continuously making assessments and decisions that guide their teaching and learning. They are in the moment micro decisions. And they do this by way of observing students, of noting their conversations that they're having with them and with their peers, and then looking at the artifacts of their learning. It's important to underscore that we regularly communicate those assessment and evaluation information both to students and their families. And it may seem obvious, but I think it bears repeating, that assessment and evaluation operate on sentient human beings. They're not widgets. They have emotional, not just intellectual responses to assessment and evaluation. They feel assessment and evaluation. Assessment in a diverse and dynamic world. So here we stand a quarter of the way through the 21st century, and schools and classrooms continue to be microcosms of larger society. As the pressures mount on our families and on our systems, we feel that in schools. For sure, the load and expectations of our schools are not diminishing. And as a consequence, the backpack of teachers and other adults' responsibilities in schools are not getting any lighter. And I say this without any judgment whatsoever, but as an acknowledgement of common reality, of a common reality. If you are not immersed in the public education system, it's possible that you can entertain a fixed or a frozen in time view of assessment and evaluation practices. so that essentially what you experience yourself in school then becomes a reference point for what is happening now. But we have spent well over a decade with structures and strategies to support multiple pathways for students and championing a definition of success that recognizes more than a metric of students entering universities. And at the same time, we've continued to offer flexible and responsive approaches to teaching and learning that meet the interests, strengths, needs of our students and also reflect their experiences. So here's a story, I've changed names of people in the stories here, and I hope this helps to humanize my comments. So Rena is a colleague from Ottawa, and she said to me, she says, Ian, we're having a conversation about change. She says, it's not that things in my classroom are changing. They have always changed. It's the pace or the velocity of change. So my classroom is fundamentally different every 2 years. That's extraordinary. And teachers are also on a trajectory of constant professional learning to meet those ever-changing and diverse needs, experiences, interests, and strengths of their students. We continue to seek out a wide range of those innovative and engaging ways for students to learn and to use effective means to assess the learning and also to explore real-world opportunities for them to communicate them, to show us what they know and can do. The implications of high-stakes, large-scale performance tests. So against this backdrop of progressive, responsive assessment practices, students come up against standardized or one-size-fits-all approach or test, which challenges some of the best practices in assessment. Students in Ontario classrooms are subjected to a range of such tasks. Most are administered as random sample. In other words, only some students are tested. EQAO is an exception. It is census-based, so all students in grades 3, 6, 9, and 10 write those tests. Granted, in Ontario, we do not mirror many of the American states and other jurisdictions where students encounter a very heavy diet and battery of large-scale tests, the results of which often determine funding allocations. I just want to say we cannot venture there. Other jurisdictions in Canada and internationally have recognized that the high-stakes external testing bloom is off the assessment rose and are changing course. Despite public remonstrations, including pronouncements from EQAO itself, so I want to be fair about that, results on EQAO scores continue to earn coveted front and center spot in the media, real estate listings, and think tank reports, and also school and board improvement plans. The pressure to increase scores equals an end in self, and policy and decision makers run the real risk, which already happens, of being drawn to what seems convenient or easy to measure. Already, disproportionate amount of time, energy, and resources, human and monetary, relative to the importance or usefulness, are expended on the lead up to and the administration of such tests. And you might be thinking, well, EQAO tests only occur in 3, 6, 9, and 10. But I can assure you that the administration of tests in grades 4, or the prospect of that, has cascading consequences for preceding grades. So there is a collateral impact, for instance, on grades 1 and 2 and 4 and 6. Time spent on EQAO assessments means time not spent on other important subjects, topics, and tasks. So furthermore, one might say that at this stage, feedback from EQAO tests is to students what autopsy results would be to a patient: too little, too late. This is Mona's and Alex's story. Mona was a teacher as a special ed resource in a school in inner city Oshawa in an area of significant socioeconomic diversity. Every class had a large number of students with special needs. One boy with whom she was working in grade 6, Alex, had serious learning disabilities which had plagued him all throughout school, and he suffered from debilitating low self-esteem. Alex was terrified of the EQAO testing for which his classroom teacher and Mona had spent much time preparing him. He confessed on several occasions, "I'm going to fail." Mona made it her business to work with him daily and reassure him that she would be there to help him all along the way and that accommodations would support him throughout. He was skeptical, but Mona managed to convince him that he would do okay and that he would not fail. By the time the testing started, he was pretty confident that he might be successful. Fast forward to the following fall. Results were published in the newspaper. Alex heard the results on a local radio station. Alex and Mona's school, with all its challenges and issues, had ranked very low. Alex came into school the next day and announced to Mona that she had lied to him, that the grade 6s were the dumbest of all. When Mona told me that story, she added, "I was never able to get Alex back to a place where he cared about school again." We want our students to sail on ships of hope, not tie them to the dock of despair. This leaves us asking how it is helpful to help a contribution to learning or self-esteem growth or well-being when students are anxious and reduced to tears in anticipation of writing that test. Relying on the results from external to the classroom large-scale tests to validate student achievement can lead to knee-jerk reactions and decisions that plunge us headlong into ill-conceived fix-its or poorly considered Band-Aid policies. Those kind of approaches belong in a fictional film sequel to Our Brand is Crisis, not in classrooms. Taken to extremes, the prime directive of "we gotta raise those scores" can result in a promotion of shrink-wrapped menus or recipes for improvement that overlook the complexity of school communities, ignore microclimates of our classrooms, and relegate important teacher-created and administered assessments, in other words, classroom-generated evidence, to the margins. In closing, I asked you to I invited you to think of a positive, memorable assessment experience. I'm imagining, I'm pretty safe in my assumption, that none of those include a large-scale test. Perhaps it was a barrier that got you unstuck, something that led to a feeling of, yes, I can, or inspired you to explore, wonder about, or imagine other possibilities. I'll just end with one of my best assessment and evaluation memories as a classroom teacher. Priya was a grade 11 history student. She said there had been all sorts of criteria that had been shared with students in advance. I think I can communicate my learning through a piece of artwork. But she says, I'm not sure if I can manage that. What if I fail? What if it doesn't work? And I just looked at her and I said, so what would that feel like if you were successful? And she said, that would feel fantastic. So I smiled. I looked at her like this. She said, okay, I'll go for it. Over the next period of a couple of weeks, we spent some time checking in, but I didn't see the final product until she walked in on the day when she was to share her learning with all the other students and myself. And as she walked in with her piece of artwork, students rallied around her and they said, "Priya, we didn't realize you were in the arts program." And a big smile appeared on her face, and she says, "I'm not." You see, now that's student success writ large. I've never forgotten that story. Hope she hasn't either. Here's 3 key takeaways here. I know my time is over. Teachers are learners too. So I used to say that 35 students in front of me on a regular basis. We're so lucky we have 35 teachers in here. Of course, some of them interpreted that this guy knows nothing. That's not what I meant. So, to be sure, though, the stakes are always high for public education. It doesn't mean that we have to rely on high-stakes tests to meet our worthy goals. On June 14th, here we go, sorry. On June 14th of last year, this appeared on the EQAO Twitter feed. Want a complete picture of how your children are doing in school? Ask their teacher, not their EQAO results. Exactly. This is the last common rallying point. When we confuse narrow scores with entire breadth of evidence that's available to us, we fixate on pixels and lose sight of the big picture. We risk mattering, new verb, only what we measure. So we have to ask ourselves whether there's a grander vision for public education than simply producing better test takers. In the big picture, our students, our young people, our citizens are surely more than grades or scores Or as one 12-year-old Ontario student said it most eloquently, I am more than a dot on a chart.